what state should we be withholding our employees' taxes on, and where are there real issues there as far as, a lot of people were working in Florida, or some people that were in New York working in Florida, some people that were in Pennsylvania or were in Delaware or moving to Pennsylvania or New Jersey. How do we see states figuring all that out? Is this a issue that's going to be, or a complexity that we're going to be dealing with probably for the next 3 to 5 years, as once the states catch up with everything going on?
Yeah, so I would say, unfortunately, the answer to your question is most likely for a number of jurisdictions that really haven't issued specific guidance or that don't have specific rules. So, for example, states like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania issued very specific guidance saying, essentially the rule that they employed was don't change your withholding for now. There's a temporary situation for remote work, sort of leave it as is. The question becomes, what happens going forward if that situation continues? Does the rule change? And that's something that really, there isn't necessarily an answer to today. One of the things that we always talk about in the state and local world, when it comes to sort of figuring out what some of the ramifications are from some of the things happening through COVID or even federal changes, is, states and localities didn't pass rules for once in a lifetime pandemics. And so we're all kind of playing catch up and trying to essentially figure out, where the law is going to go. And sort of in adding on to your question, there's other ramifications for the remote work as well. Things like, in addition to withholding, does a company now have nexus, i.e. a taxable presence in that state, and has to file an income tax return or maybe collect sales tax if they're making taxable sales of tangible property or services. Also, some other issues are like income sourcing. So let's say they're filing in different states and they have people now that are working in different locations. Does that income get sourced to those locations now because people are working there, as opposed to customer location or things like that? So there's been, added complexities from the telework situation, in addition to just all the federal changes that occurred based on, the pandemic.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's a great point that, there already was a push by certain states from a economic nexus standpoint based upon revenue. And now that once we have employees working remotely, how that really could be drag more activity into that state and hence increase state tax liability. I thought that was a very good point.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, again, added sort of point that comes up here is when you're dealing with sellers of tangible property, there's a federal law. So earlier I said Congress very rarely passes statutes that affect state taxes. Here's an example where Congress actually did do something where it's called PL 86272. That's the public law at the federal level. And that's something that basically says for sellers of tangible property, if their only activity in the state is selling into the state or having any kind of like marketing or solicitation activities for those sales, and the sales are fulfilled out of state and sent into the state cannot impose an income tax, a net income tax on those companies. But one of the things that comes up is, okay, now we're in this remote work situation. Is that protection gone because there's an employee that's working remotely? One of the concepts that's in that federal law is something called a de minimis concept. Is it de minimis that the employee worked for several months, in one location, and due to the pandemic, should that blow the protection from nexus? That's an open question. So, there's a lot of issues that I think that are going to need to be sorted out, whether it's legislatively at the state level, via regulation, administrative guidance, or maybe even litigation.